Good evening, scholars. This is Tanya Wilcox, Program Director for TheDream.Us. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are very excited to have with us Cheryl Aguilar, who has done a lot of work with students in similar situations as you, and she's going to help us bring balance and health, mental health to our lives. So Cheryl, thank you for joining us. Cheryl is a social worker based in DC. She does a lot of case management and support for students with DACA, with TPS, and all kinds of immigrant students. So she's going to share a lot of her knowledge, wisdom with you today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Cheryl. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good evening from Washington, D.C. I hope everyone is doing well, and I'm really honored to be in your presence, in your virtual presence today. Thank you for choosing to be here with us tonight. If you hear me okay, or if you cannot hear me, you can go ahead and include that in the chat, and we'll make sure that I adjust my volume. So we're gonna, as people kind of trickle into the call, we're just gonna begin today's talk, today's wellness circle, by centering ourselves to get ready to get into this space where we're going to learn maybe new things, maybe relearn things that we have already practiced, and just give ourselves the gift to take a pause from everything that is happening around you. Wherever you may be, one of our goals today is that you relax, that you can let go for a few minutes of whatever stresses or worries may be keeping you up at night. If you're in your dorm or in your apartment, you feel free to lay in your bed. You don't have to look at us throughout the 45 minutes, the next 40 minutes. You can just lay in your bed, relax. If you're in a chair, you can make yourself comfortable, feel like you're at home. Wherever you are right now, whether you're laying down or sitting, we're gonna sit up straight or relax. And if you're laying down, just lay down the most relaxed that you can be. If you feel comfortable, allow your eyes to close at this moment. If you prefer to keep them open, pick an area wherever you are that you can gaze at for the next few minutes. And as you allow your body to come to rest, we're going to begin taking a few breaths, breathing in slowly through your nose and breathing out slowly. Allowing yourself to relax with each breath. Breathing in through your nose, breathing out. Following each breath from beginning to end. Notice what it feels like to be intentional and to come back to a neutral place. We're going to repeat this for a few more minutes. Noticing how your body feels right now. Noticing how your heart feels right now. We're going to breathe in hope and breathe out doubt. We're going to breathe in peace and breathe out anything that doesn't serve us right now. If your mind starts thinking or wondering, just notice that gently and come back to your breathing. By coming back to our breath over and over again, we get closer to the pure self that we are, the most neutral we can ever be, the most balanced. We're not wired to take a pause, but sometimes we have to. Brené Brown believes that to be courageous, we must have vulnerability. She believes that vulnerability is the courage to show up when you can't control the outcome, just like you're doing. You show up to school, to work. You show up for your family and friends. You show up to your other obligations. And that's the first step. Half of the battle is already won. To continue on your path to your destination, we're going to come back to your purest intention. We're going to come back to the intention that made you be where you are right now. So today is going to be about letting go, learning, being in fellowship, and renew hope. We're going to take a few more deep breaths, following from beginning to end. Knowing that we can always come back to the space whenever we need to. At the sound of my bell, you may open your eyes very slowly. Welcome, everyone. I like to start that way because we're so used to doing that it's important that we practice taking a pause as much as we can. And if I was here in person, or if I was there in person with you, I will ask you, how did that feel? So at this moment, feel free to type in on your box, your chat box, or raise your hand if you would like to say it out loud, how those few seconds, few minutes of stillness might have made you feel.
Scholars, as you will see on your control panel, you have a section where you can enter any of your thoughts or ideas or questions. Or on your control panel, there's also a hand icon that you can click on, and then we'll know that you want to speak and share something. We have Adrian writing in saying that he feels at peace.
And if there's nothing that comes up right now, that's okay as well. It's really hard to come back sometimes after that.
Viviana is saying that she feels light and at peace.
Viviana, and you did that on your own. You have the tools already to bring that onto yourself. Thank you for sharing. It may be hard for some people because we're not used to it. Some people may feel that it's refreshing. And these are a few of the tools that we're going to learn today that are going to help us to kind of come back to the present moment when we feel distressed or we feel worried. If you notice that I look down, it's because I wrote a few things that I want to make sure I don't forget to tell you before we go away. So if I just want to let you know that I'm still with you if I'm looking down. So we're going to go ahead and get started. If we can please change the slide to the next slide. And we're going to stay here for a few seconds. We heard what you wrote. We read what you wrote in terms of how you were feeling, in terms of your emotions and feelings at this time. And we saw a few themes. And we thought it was important that we share this back with you. Some of the themes that we saw from what you may be experiencing at this moment is feelings of anxiety, feelings of stress, feelings of hopelessness, and lack of motivation sometimes. And this is in part for some of you because of finals, because of uncertainty, because there's a lot on your plate. For some people, had to do with the political environment, family, and many other factors. When I saw this in your responses, I couldn't help but to think how courageous you are in doing everything that you're doing. You're managing a lot already. And what it was important for me to kind of reflect on was that there was like scores of people, dozens of people who had a similar answer. And sometimes we kind of feel alone in our distress and we think we're the only ones experiencing that. But there was a lot of you feeling the same way. And the reason why I want to say that is because I want to normalize that you guys are going through a few transitions in your life. That transition of perhaps ending a semester, perhaps some of you may be graduating, perhaps some of you may be thinking about what's next. So you're going through a few transitions. And transitions are one of the most common reasons why people kind of develop stress or can develop challenges, symptoms of mental health. So you're not alone in your distress, but that doesn't mean that it feels good what you're experiencing. If I was to tell you that about 80 of you and about maybe 60 or so of you responded saying that you were either stressed, depressed, or anxious, what will you think? What comes to mind when you know that a lot of other people are feeling the same way that you're feeling? If anybody wants to kind of share or wants to text or chat with us, feel free to do so. And what's important to know about what you may be experiencing is that some of these feelings are temporary and some of them can be kind of addressed with self-care. And that's the reason why today's talk, Wellness Circle, was about self-care. Self-care has been found to be a tool or intervention or practice that can allow us to kind of mediate symptoms of anxiety, depression, and stress. So when we practice self-care, we're going to do it with the intention to repair what has been broken, to practice daily so we maintain, and so we prevent. And then we're going to talk about the difference between repairing right now on your own and maybe repairing with the support of a professional. So we hear you and we feel what you're feeling, perhaps not to the extent that you're feeling it because you're unique and you're experiencing this in a unique way. But we know what it means, and I am really grateful to the TheDream.Us team for knowing how important it is to bring health to you all. We can move to the next slide.
Cheryl, before we move, there are a couple of comments.
Sure.
Mark is saying that he wishes he could do more of the breathing exercises, that he should do that on a daily basis. So I would say, Mike and everyone, be important to take a few minutes every day to just breathe. And another scholar is saying that she feels like she's not alone anymore, hearing that so many other people are feeling this way, and that she can, has a support system.
Great.
And
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing those insights.
any other scholars, you can also speak if you wish to speak by raising your hand. We would love to hear your voice too. So I'll take you to the next slide, Cheryl.
Thank you. Thank you. And I love that comment about maybe starting this on an everyday basis. It takes just a few minutes, as you can see. I wanted to talk a little bit about stress because stress is what most people were experiencing. And if we were to describe stress in a very simple way, is this overwhelming feeling that something cannot get done. That no matter how much we try, something is just so overwhelming and so scary that it cannot be done. So stress has to do a lot with thoughts, with the way that we think, and sometimes we have a lot of thoughts, recurrent thoughts, and they don't go away. And sometimes it can also show up in our body. Most of the time, stress actually shows up in our body as what we call somatic symptoms. So people may experience stomach aches or headaches, or a lot of the stress for some people show up in the back, in their back or their shoulders. For me, my stress shows up in my face, like I get really tight, and that's how I know, like, ooh, something's happening. So I wanted to know if some of you can identify where stress may show up in your body. And the important thing about recognizing where it shows up is because our body is pretty amazing. It literally tells us when we need to take action. It literally speaks to us. But the problem is that sometimes we're so busy and we haven't learned to hear the body that we don't see the signs. So this week, when we finish this circle, I want you guys to kind of pay attention to where does my stress show up? And that's an opportunity for you to take some action. If one of you can share or two of you can share where stress may show up in your body, on this slide, you can see a few. It's really tiny, but you can see some of the choices are like in your head, so headaches, in your stomach area. A lot of stress shows up there. Sometimes in our mouth, like our teeth, we clench them, and sometimes in our hands, they become really tense. Anybody has anything to share around that?
If anyone's typing in. Someone says that they get getting sick to their stomach and the throat gets very tight. Another one says that I lose a lot of weight to the point where it becomes very unhealthy, or hyperventilation and
Yeah,
tachycardia.
yeah,
Those are the symptoms. Or the
yeah.
stress goes on shoulders, and my shoulders feel stiff and tight.
Yeah. So every time you feel that, is your body telling you something's happening, we need to do something about it. And for some people, that may be like, okay, I need to take a hot shower to allow my muscles to kind of relax. Okay, I need to call my doctor because something's happening. The main thing is just now that I see that you guys are really good at recognizing what happens to you, the important thing is what do we do next? So knowing that your body is telling you something, our bodies are alarm system that we need to take action before something else happens. So we can move on to the next slide. And I'm just going to speak a little bit more on the slides, and then we're going to get to the fun stuff, which is practicing a little bit more. Why self-care? As I share, is a evidence-based. I know some people here that are in school, they all about data and evidence. So this is self-care is an evidence-based intervention that works, but it works when we practice it in a very intentional and mindful way. So self-care is basically the practice of nurturing our body, our minds, our souls, our spirit, our spiritual sense. And one of the reasons why people, when I talk to like hundreds of people about self-care and what may get in the way of them doing self-care, and what most people say to me when I speak to them is, I don't have money, I don't have time to go on vacation, I don't have time in general, I don't like going to the spa, And when I started asking these questions, I discovered that there's erroneous idea of what self-care is. So all of those things that I mentioned are activities that are part of self-care, but they're activities. It doesn't mean they're the definition. But one way to kind of simplify how to integrate this into our day is to think about it something, it could be something small that can bring joy into your life, whatever that may be. And it may kind of fall into a spectrum that we're going to look at next. Something that brings joy and uplifts my spirit, something that brings joy at work, something that brings joy in my personal relationships, something that I can integrate on a daily basis that is small. And self-care, the best way to do self-care is when it best fits you, your uniqueness, your resources. So you don't have to really spend, if you're in California, I love California, you can go to the beach, you can go to the mountains, whatever it may be. And what works for one person may not work for somebody else. So if you like yoga, your friend may not like that. So we're going to kind of work with our uniqueness. If we can go on to the next slide.
Hold on.
So when we do this on a daily basis, the idea is that we're strengthening our minds and our bodies, so we prevent some of the things that we talked about, like stress and anxiety and other challenges.
Sorry, my PowerPoint just closed. So Donna, could you take over and do the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes,
Cheryl.
I will. So our task right now would be, as we're getting the slides up, to think about, do I do self-care? What does that even look like right now when I'm in school and I may have an internship, or I may have work, or I'm just simply in school and I work full time? That's kind of going to be some of the questions that we're going to be asking. So self-care we're using as a tool to prevent and to manage. I wanted to share this a little bit because when do we go from prevention and taking quick action amongst ourselves to then going to someone else? Maybe talking to someone who's like qualified to kind of help us through a difficult time. So the best way for me to explain mental health distress is to kind of look at what happens when we comparing, helping people compare when are they at their best, when are they their best self, when do they feel the best that they can feel. And you can type in your questions, but I'm gonna name some of the things that people have told me. Is that people may say, I feel at my best when I'm excited about going to work. I feel at my best when I find joy on like seeing the trees when I walk to work. I my best self when I laugh with my friends. So if you are thinking around what is my best self and you want to share with us, let us know. So we have to know our best self to know when we're not our best self. And one way to kind of differentiate between the two is to know when there's changes. So mental health signs and challenges sometimes show up as in terms of changes in mood, like I'm all of a sudden like sad or really upset or irritable. When we start kind of like snapping at people and we're not, that's not our nature, that's the cue. Okay, something, I'm not my best self right now. When there's changes in the way that we either eat more or we eat less. When there's changes in the way that we sleep more or we sleep less. Our energy decreases. Lack of concentration. This is a big one for a lot of people. Like I can't concentrate and I read things over and over and I just don't get it. So lack of concentration. And a few difference between depression and anxiety, which is the two of the things that people mention, is that depression is usually kind of manifested in terms of some of the symptoms that we talked about, and then lots of thoughts about the past, like just being kind of feeling like I'm stuck in the past. And anxiety is kind of like fast forward, like thinking a lot about the future and thinking a lot about things that haven't happened. So depression is like if we rewind the movie, we're going to the past, and if we fast forward, we're going to the future. So that's the difference between depression and anxiety. So most of us experience any of this like on a weekly basis or monthly basis, most of us experience some of these changes. The difference is when we experience them for 2 weeks consecutively. That's when it's important to kind of maybe talk to my primary care doctor or someone else that you may have available to you. Did anybody have anything to share about their best self?
Let's see. Here someone says, I feel my best when I see a sunset and when I take nature pictures.
Oh, thank you. So you have the energy to do that, to enjoy the things that you normally would. And that's another sign when we all of a sudden are not excited about the things that we normally would love to do, something's happening. Thank you for sharing that. If there's no other comments, we can go to the next slide. Okay. I love this slide because this happens to all of us, and sometimes we don't have a name for it. This is the flight, fight, and freeze response. Some of us might have heard about this. Some of us, this may be all new. But when we are stressed out or on the face of maybe a threat or something that our body or our brain experiences as scary, our brain sends 3 different signals. Any of us can respond in any of this way. We either fight, so we are stressed out, but we fight and we mobilize. Fight, I mean by like mobilizing, doing something about what we're stressed about. So that may look like I'm stressed about this test. I really have to study. I'm going to study. So that's kind of like the fight mode. The flight is kind of like avoidance, like, oh, I'm going to run. Like, I can't deal with this. This is too overwhelming. Let me just watch Netflix. That's kind of like flight avoidance. And freeze, it's like we totally, like our body, our brain just kind of shuts down. We're like, we can't do anything, you know? So freeze and flight are like a little bit similar. So any of us can respond in any of these 3 ways in the face of when something feels scary, in the face of a threat, or when we're really stressed out. So if anything like this is happening to you, it has a name. And the great thing about knowing this is that you can actually just name it when it's happening. Ooh, like I'm freezing. My brain is telling me like something scary is happening. Like I'm really stressed. Like I'm not gonna get through this. So it's sometimes just by naming it that has the potential for that intensity to decrease. We kind of call it name it to tame it. We name that emotion or we name what's happening for that to decrease. We're gonna move on to the next slide because I really want to get to the good stuff. And another reason why self-care, is that our emotions are contagious. How many of us have like friends who are like super happy and we're like, oh my God, I want to be around so-and-so because she's going to make me like laugh and smile. We all have those friends. How many of us have or people that we're like, oh, I don't want to see fulanita. I don't want to see that person because they're going to like put me in a bad mood. Our emotions are contagious. And sometimes when we're not caring for ourselves, all of those emotions that we're feeling are like being passed on to other people. And we're also receiving that from other people as well. So imagine if we talked about 80 people who signed up to this webinar and about 60 of them responding that were feeling stressed and everyone was in the same room. What would that look like? A lot of stress because our emotions are contagious. So caring for us is the first step, but also it allows us to kind of share a different energy with other people as well. If we can move on to the next slide. And I'm going to let you kind of browse through the slides on your own because I want to make sure that we practice a few things. So this is a wheel. This is a very kind of fun way to kind of look at self-care. And it has a few ideas of activities and things that you can do to nurture yourself emotionally, spiritual, personal, professional, and your physical self.
And Cheryl, let me just
Yes.
mention that is all of you scholars should see a little section on your control panel with handouts. There are 5 handouts there for you. And included on those handouts are all these slides plus more.
Mm-hmm. Great. So you're going to have all this information, everything or most of what I know about self-care in there. So I'm just going to kind of go through a few things. If we can go on to the next slide. And Really simple. A few things to kind of highlight about self-care is that the first thing is going back to the basics, getting enough sleep. I wish you could all raise your hand to tell me how many of you are getting enough sleep. I bet some of you may not be because of the nature or where you are in life right now. Uh, if we think of self-care as part of our survival, like we have to eat, we have to breathe, we have to shower maybe sometimes, we have to nurture ourselves to survive. So self-care is also like that. Without that, we don't have like the vitamin that we need to kind of keep on going. Self-care is best practice when you do it throughout the day. So for me, my self-care may look like I may come home and drink my favorite tea at night, and I may do that. I may do little things like that repeatedly throughout the day. And we're not going to reinvent the wheel. We're going to do the things that we love, and we're just going to do more of that. And we're going to learn how to say no, and you'll see more in the handouts, because boundaries means that you're saying no to things, and sometimes that's really difficult, but that allows you to say yes to yourself and other things that are important to you. The best way for me to put it is when you say yes to something or someone, and if you're overcommitted or you have something else to do, when you say yes to that, what am I saying no to for myself? Does that mean I'm spending less time studying or less time with friends or less time just being by myself, you know? All right, next. Now I think we get to practice. We don't get to practice yet. Visuals are really important. It's like brain based. It's all about the visuals. Sometimes when we are surrounded around things that are kind of like chaotic, a lot of mess, piles of papers, like clothes all over, whatever it may be, like messy offices, the brain thinks like there's chaos. So that kind of sends like this idea of like, oh, there's like stress, something's happening. So even just by having things organized in a very kind of neat way, or a more kind of relaxed way, it may make a difference. Sometimes I tell people, put a nice, if you spend a lot of time on your computers, a little tiny trick that you can do is put a nice relaxing background on the back of your computer, because you're looking at the screen all day. So on this slide, I have some of the things. On this picture, I have some of the things that are most important to me in my office. I have a plant to remind me that there's life. No matter what happens here, like whatever happens here, like when I get out of here, there's life. I have my bell to remind me I gotta like take a deep breath. I have rocks to remind me of like mountains or things that I love. So make sure that you surround yourself with things that are important to you, whether in your room or your dorm or your office, or having it with you wherever you go. Okay, next. Okay, so what we did initially was mindfulness, and basically mindfulness, I'm sure a lot of you have heard it. It's been on the mainstream for the last maybe five to 10 years, but this is a practice that has been in the United States for like over 40 years already. It's been introduced in hospitals, it's been introduced in schools as a way to manage the things that we talked about: stress, anxiety, and depression. And simply put, mindfulness is the practice of coming back to the present moment, coming back over and over and over again. And what that allows us to do is being unstuck from the past and not staying stuck in a future that hasn't happened. So just coming back to what's around us. Next slide. All right, finally, mindful breathing. So we started this with mindful breathing. So you have an idea of what that looks like. When our thoughts, we're going to do it really quickly right now. If you can close your eyes or keep them open and gaze at something around you. We're just going to take a few deep breaths, breathing in through your nose and breathing out. And notice what the mind is doing as you're breathing in and out. If your mind is thinking, we can simply label it that way, thinking, and bring your attention back to your breathing. If you're planning what you're going to do next, simply label that planning and bring your attention back to your breathing. Every time your mind goes somewhere else, just notice that and walk it back to your breathing. All right. Feel free to open your eyes slowly. So we think about 70,000 thoughts a day. Who knew that? 70,000 thoughts. That's a lot of thoughts. Most of them are automatic. We don't even realize we're thinking. Like when we open the door, like we don't realize that your brain is telling you open, like move that doorknob and get into the door, close that. Most of our thoughts are automatic and most of them are repetitive. So imagine it's 70,000 thoughts a day. Most of them are repetitive, and if most of them are about stressful things, that's a lot of distress. The thing about the mind is that we don't have to engage in every thought every time we hear something. Like every time you hear something like, perhaps like maybe, oh my God, I may not graduate. What we normally do is that we talk back to this thought and we're like, oh my God, I'm not going to graduate. Oh my God, I'm not going to get a job. Oh my God, what's going to happen with my future? So it kind of spirals. We start talking back to it. So what we're simply going to do is like pause that. The moment that we have that thought, we're going to pause it. Notice that that's happening. Okay, like I'm worried. Come back to your breathing or come back to something that is around you. What I tell people is schedule worry time. It sounds very ridiculous, I know. I have every client that I work with do this. It sounds ridiculous until you try it and it actually works. So for instance, what does this look like? You have to get through finals, right? But you also worry about a future. You may also be worried about immigration status. You may also be worried about your family's future. There's a lot of worries right now, but you cannot entertain all of them because otherwise you won't have time to get to what you need to, which is studying. So when you have a worry about my immigration status, literally what you can say to your mind is like, okay, I noticed that I'm worried. I'm going to stop and I'm going to table that for when I can worry about that. Sometimes I tell people, I have my phone, like schedule worry time, like say from 7 to 7:30, I'm going to go home and I'm going to worry about everything I want to worry, but that's my dedicated time to worry time. After 7:30, I'm back to my life. So see if it works for you. People sometimes tell me like, oh my God, that's not going to work. Try it and see if it resonates with you. When our mind gets distracted, it may get stuck again in the past or the future. One way to come back is using our 5 senses, and we're going to do that right now. I call this 5 senses grounding. Well, I didn't invent it. We call it 5 senses grounding. Basically, right now, we're going to kind of look around what's in the room where you are, and we're just going to notice objects. So I'm going to tell you what it sounds like. Plant, white plant, clear glass, refrigerator. So just notice what's around you and label it and move on to the next object. You can notice colors, sizes, dimension. If your mind starts creating stories like, oh, that plant looks like the one that my mom had, it's time to move on to the next object. So we're not creating stories, we're just noticing what we see. So now we're gonna kind of see if we can hear anything that is in the room. It could be something that is in your room or where you are or coming from outside or even your own body. So allow your ear to follow that sound. Just notice what you hear. Have you heard that sound before? Now we're gonna see if we can smell anything where you are. So allow your nose to follow any smell that is in the room or where you are. See if you can detect anything. Sometimes I'm like, oh, this is when I need to take my trash out. Now we're gonna do touch, and we're just gonna like rub our hands. Just notice what they feel like, what your fingers feel like. You can rub your face, just notice your face. If your feet are on the ground, notice what they feel like planted on the ground. If you're sitting, notice what it feels like having sitting on that chair. If you're touching anything else, just notice that. And the last thing is taste. If you don't have anything to eat, because you're not required to do that, I normally tell people you can lick your lips. And appreciate that taste. I wanted to ask, I'm mindful of time, and I wanted to ask my co-coordinators and my co-leaders, I just wanted to see if this will shut off in the next few minutes. And I wanted to ask everyone in this room if it doesn't, if I have your permission to continue for a few more minutes.
So it keeps going, Cheryl, until we decide that it's over, and
Okay.
stop. Stay on for a few minutes if you have the time.
Okay. So I want to be respectful of your time. So I wanted to see if you would like to stay a few more minutes to go over a few more things. If you can let us know in the chat.
People are staying on, so I think you can just go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. That's a great cue. So can somebody tell me what they noticed when we were doing 5 senses grounding?
Feel free to write in or raise your hand and speak.
So for most people, what people may notice is that you're not really stuck in the activity that is happening in your mind, because your mind is moving quickly to new things. So like all that dialogue that normally happens, we don't notice it because now we're focused on new things. So that's the trick of this exercise. Some people might say this is really hard, and it's always very hard when you're doing something new. So if it resonates, or if you feel like you want to give it a little bit more time, go ahead and try it. Rewiring the brain with positive experience basically means that our brains gravitate towards the negative, and it's actually a protective thing. Like if we focus on the negative, that helps us plan around it sometimes. So it remembers like bad memories, because then it would alert us, oh, we shouldn't do that again. So our brain is not really good at just kind of keeping the good memories, kind of like keeping the good snapshots in our mind, but that's when we come in. So how do we do that? We basically make an inventory. That sounds really kind of like workish, but we make an inventory of positive memories that we have, a positive experience, especially when we're in a time of distress, because they don't come natural to us. But I sometimes write like 5 things that I want to remember when I'm like super like distressed or super sad. And doing the mindful breathing with my eyes closed, what we do is then try to activate that memory. So if we can close our eyes, or you can keep them open if you like, think of one positive memory that brought you some joy. If it's hard for you to remember that right now, think of something you would like to do that will bring you some joy, and imagine what that looks like. So as we're bringing in that memory or thinking about a potential new experience, notice what feeling may come up for you. Maybe you can envision what you were wearing that time or who you were with. Maybe you can see some of the details from that memory or from that hopeful thing you want to happen. Notice what feeling kind of comes up for you and how your body may feel right now. Let's take a deep breath and come back. That was a super minute version, super tiny version of bringing a memory. So if it works for you, the way to do this is when you're in a moment where all you can feel is sadness, upset, fear, frustration, irritation, notice that. We don't want to negate those feelings. Okay, I'm frustrated, I'm mad, I'm pissed, I'm super scared, I'm terrified. And that feeling is real. So we're going to name it, we're going to notice it, and then we're going to see if we can shift to a memory that has a more positive emotion for you. And even if you have to make up a vision, this is what it's going to look like when I graduate. So you can kind of bring in a new emotion to counterbalance the other one that you were feeling. In the handouts, actually in the next slide, there's something called thinking styles. And we all do this thinking styles, and this is primarily what causes a lot of distress. We predict what's going to happen when we don't know the outcome. We mind read. We do all or nothing, like black and white thinking. So it's either like this or that, but there's no middle ground. So all of us do this, and this is one of the reasons why we experience a lot of distress. How do we get rid of this? It's just simply, I mentioned notice it, because that's truly what happens. That's truly a tool to kind of minimize what you're experiencing, and we start naming what we're experiencing. So what that looks like is maybe I'm talking to my husband, and then I just make a story of what I think he said or what I think he's gonna say. I'm mind reading. Or I may predict, like tomorrow is going to be a really hard day. I'm going to be so tired. I'm going to have no energy. I'm not going to give my best to my clients. And I may go into this mode of things that I truly don't know. So when we notice that, we're going to get familiar with all these thinking styles, and we're going to just notice that, oh, I'm totally mind reading right now. And then it kind of helps you shift to a more balanced way of thinking. So usually I say people, thoughts have to be fact-based. So let's look at the facts. So allow yourself to look at the facts of your situation as you're struggling right now. So your situation right now, I'm going to make up a few facts. I don't know you all, but I'm going to make up a few facts about the group. You must be really hardworking people to have been able to earn this scholarship. You may be really committed to what you want to do in your life, to have pursued college and have pursued opportunities. You must be really driven. So those are facts about yourself that led you to where you are. And what the mind feeds us are a lot of false truth. So we always kind of come back to the facts. If we can go on to the next slide. And one of my gifts to you was that you have some tools to prepare a self-care plan. So in the handouts that you received a template to create a self-care plan. You received an assessment so you can assess where you are in your self-care. And this is a really another quick visual to look at how to nurture the different parts of ourself for holistic balance. So remember, body, mind, spirit, and heart. Body, mind, spirit, and heart. So the way to kind of do a quick self-care plan on the spot is thinking about 2 things for each category that you can do each day. I bet you're already doing the mind part because you're probably studying or you're doing work in school, so you're already kind of engaging the mind. So thinking about 2 things that you can do each day, each week around these categories. The last thing that I wanted to say is that when we're stressed and when we're anxious, there's this overwhelming feeling that we can't control things. And when we're not able to kind of have control over our situation, it gets to be really scary. And sometimes we think about the things that we can control, and we spend a lot of our energy on that. I cannot control when somebody's upset at me. I cannot control when a client really hates me, because that happens. I cannot control when the economy goes down. I cannot control many things, but there's many things that I do control. I have the control to be here with you right now. I chose that. I made that choice. I have the control to respond in a kind way when somebody may not be so kind to me. I have that control. You have the control to choose to go to class. You have that control. You have the control to choose to study. You have that control. What's going to happen tomorrow? We don't. But there's many things right now that you do have a lot of control over. So when we finish today and throughout the week, focus on the little things and the big things that you may have control over. And sometimes when we start noticing that, we notice that there's actually a lot more than I might have thought that I had control over. I have control whether I want to go watch Netflix next or not. I get to control that. And the last thing is gratitude. Or another way to look at it also. So there's gratitude, practicing gratitude, and practicing looking at the things that went well during the day, as minor as they seem, or something that we're really grateful for. And there's lots of research that people who find joy in their life kind of practice this. And one way to practice it, I use my phone a lot because I'm in electronics a lot. I pull out my little notepad every day, and I kind of type in 3 things that were good about my day. And sometimes things are like, oh, I ate mango at the park, like very kind of minor things. Oh, like the bus came on time. Oh, I actually didn't go to work late today. So noticing, just adding 3 things a day. Sometimes it may be hard for people to come up with 3 in the beginning. 1 thing a day that went well, something that went well for you, something that you're grateful for, something that you did well. So you can add that as an everyday practice. And it's really simple. Like, can you think right now, you can share or you can just keep it in your mind of a few things that might have gone well today for you. So that's the kind of thinking that we're going to do to kind of counterbalance the other stuff that is happening. I want to close with another deep breathing exercise, just a few seconds of that. I included a lot of different resources on the handout that you received in terms of who to call if you need to talk to someone, where to find resources. I know you're getting a lot of information around that. I included more links to mindfulness, to self-care, And I want to challenge you to something that Viviana said earlier on, that we should incorporate breathing every day, even if it's just for a minute. And there's a few apps that I recommend in your handouts of things that can kind of help you remember, hey, let's just breathe. It takes just one breath. So let's get centered as we get close to say, I'll see you later. Get yourself comfortable. Thanking yourself for being here today. Bringing your attention to your breathing. Bringing your attention to your body and noticing if it feels different than when you started today. Maybe you can come up with an intention for the rest of the week and the weekends or next week. Not an outcome, but something that you'll try. And the good thing about that intention is that it doesn't have to be perfect. We may fail, but we'll try. If you're breathing, it means you have control. It means you're telling your mind, be here right now. Breathing strength. Breathe out stress. Breathing self-love. Breathe out harshness on yourself. Breathing self-compassion. And treat yourself like you would treat a crying baby. We would tender and care that crying baby. We may hold it, hug it, kiss it, and make sure that crying baby was okay. So as you finish a semester, give yourself that love that you would a crying baby. Let's take one final breath. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes slowly. Thank you for your presence today and for staying with us until now. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Cheryl, for sharing all of that with us. Scholars, know that we are thinking of you, we love you, we believe in you, and we are here for you. Have a good rest of the day. We will stay in touch. Good night.